Thank you, Hunter. So I think it's clear as we come into this meeting, 6 months after the Copenhagen Climate Summit, the largest climate meeting since that meeting, that our need for a strong climate deal has never been greater. The costs of our global addiction to fossil fuel have really become very evident and illustrated in vivid detail in recent months. Certainly within the US context, where I come from, it's been very evident that fossil fuels are dirty and dangerous in recent months with the oil spill that we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico. The costs of our dependence on fossil fuel are very evident when you see animals being covered in oil, when you see huge populations, economies and livelihoods being destroyed. And although right now in the media the focus is on the US, these kinds of oil spills happen all over the world on a regular basis. In Nigeria, in Ecuador, we see these oil spills all over the place. And it's a vivid reminder of how dirty and dangerous fossil fuels are. But we also need to remind ourselves periodically that even if this oil didn't spill, even if it was successfully drilled out of the ground and it was put into a car or an aeroplane and burned, it would cause just as much damage, and does cause just as much damage. And that's why we're here in these negotiations, is to prevent as much damage as possible and to reduce those emissions that happen when we burn those fuels. And so it's clear that we see the toll, the immediate toll of these fossil fuels when we have these spills, but we're also seeing the toll of climate change caused by these fuels already. Most recently, we've seen in Pakistan and in India devastating heat waves where many people have died as a result. The impacts exist pretty much everywhere in the world. Everywhere that each of you come from have experienced impacts of climate change. And of course, what's bitterly ironic about all of this is that we don't need to be experiencing this. We actually have all of the technologies that we need. We have the alternatives that we need to avoid using fossil fuels, to prevent deforestation, to prepare for the impacts of climate change. But we don't do it. So just today, the IEA came out with a number and pointed out that we spend $550 billion every year to subsidize fossil fuels. This is just not a good use of our resources. If we want to prevent these very expensive and dangerous impacts of climate change, we need to stop subsidizing things that cause us harm and cost us money. We need to start putting a price on those things and tax those things that are dangerous and dirty, and we need to subsidize the things that bring us out of this mess, the clean technologies. And we need an international agreement for that to happen, for us to get the real investments in clean energy, in adaptation and preparation for the impacts of climate change and preventing deforestation. And finance is really a critical piece of this, because as long as we're financing the wrong things, we're not financing the right things. And finance is something that is one of the pieces that we'll talk about a little bit later, that we really could move on. Looking ahead through this year, we have the G8 and the G20 process coming up, where finance and different sources and possible areas to raise finance is on the agenda. Also on the agenda is the removal of fossil fuel subsidies. As I talked about, the redirection of those subsidies towards clean technology would take us a long way towards where we need to be to refuel the low-carbon race and really lay the foundation for success for the climate meeting in Cancun. Here at this meeting, we've seen some progress on some technical issues, but we haven't really seen huge movement on the big crunch issues. Last year in Copenhagen, we almost finished some of our work on deforestation, or RED as we call it. We almost finished work on adaptation and finance, which Julianne will talk about in more detail. But we really need to make progress on finalizing these elements here so that Copenhagen can be a launch pad towards a legally binding deal. And so I'm going to pass it to Julianne to talk about how we can break through on some of these particular elements.